Great, that's right. So this is where we left our heroes yesterday. You were not born the size you are now. If you were, your mothers would deserve a gold medal. You start off small. You start off small. Cats start off small. Deer start off small. Earthworms start off small. Snakes start off small. Maple trees start off small. Bean plants start off small. All living things start off smaller than their final size. They grow. They develop. There are two ways that you can get bigger. One is the number of cells that you have can change. So you can add more cells. The other is you can make those cells that you do have bigger. So those are your only two options. Either get more cells or make the cells you do have bigger. Okay? Two options. And this is really this idea. Get more cells or make cells bigger. Yes, sir. Okay. You want me to read that to you? So the way to get more cells is through cell division. So the way to get more cells is to divide your cells. And then where you had one cell before, you have two. Where you had two cells, you have four. Where you had 4 cells, you have 8. And that's how embryos develop. So embryos go from 1 cell to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, on and on and on. So dividing your cells doubles the number of cells you have every time you manage to divide. Okay? The other option is that the cells you have can get bigger. And that would be cell enlargement. So to enlarge, large means big, is to make your cells bigger. Adult organisms arise through development. Adult organisms arise through development. And development is repeated cell division and a process called differentiation. Differentiation. Repeated cell division and differentiation. You have about 50 trillion cells, and those all started off as one cell. Look at how far you've come from one little tiny cell to the grand multicellular organism that you are now. Oops. Mammals, though, start off looking like miniature versions of themselves. We've got this cat here, and it starts off as a little tiny kitten, and it gets bigger until it's an adult cat. You started off as a little tiny human, something under 10 pounds for most of you, I'm sure. I would hope. You now are a full-sized human. Dogs start off as little miniature dogs and end up as full-size dogs. With things like insects, that's not the case. So, you know, this is a beetle. Well, it doesn't start off looking like a beetle. It starts off looking, well, it's a grub. It looks like this little wormy thing. If you didn't know that these two things were related, would you guess that this was a baby version of that? A lot of people wouldn't. So, organisms can change during development. Maggots turn into flies. Who would have thought? These weird little white squiggly things with no legs and no face turn into things with legs and wings and faces. That's just weird, huh? It depends on the species, but not very long. I mean, some of the longer-lived species are probably a few weeks. Some of the shorter-lived are probably a few days. As adults. Very often they live a longer time as larvae, as maggots. But it varies based on species. Okay, let's talk about differentiation. So, we have a cell. This could be one of your cells. We said cells are specialized. What does it mean that cells are specialized? So if this cell is specialized, does one job, okay? It wasn't always specialized. So remember we said you started off as one cell? And that one cell gave rise to bone cells, muscle cells, neurons, red blood cells, bone cells. One cell, like this, can become a blood cell, a muscle cell, a nerve cell, anything. What changes between the point when this one cell can become anything and when it's got one job and only one job and it can't change jobs? What's the thing that changes? The thing that changes is it differentiates. Okay? So the process is, let's see. Differentiation. Did I spell that right? Yes. Differentiation. So that one cell goes through differentiation. Before differentiation, that cell can be anything. After differentiation, it can only do one. After differentiation, that cell has one job, and it's one job for life. This is kind of like a big graduation thing. The cell can do anything, and then it gets trained to do one thing, and it's got one job for the rest of its life. That's differentiation. Cells that are undifferentiated have a special name. They are called stem cells. Have you heard of stem cells? Okay. They do stem cell transplants for some types of cancer, some kinds of leukemia and multiple myelomas. There are stem cells in your bone marrow, so down in the middle of your bones. And those stem cells have not gone through differentiation yet. They are undifferentiated. They can become anything. Once they go through differentiation, then they have specific jobs to do. They are a blood cell or a nerve cell or a muscle cell or a bone cell, and they can't change. They can't change. Reproduction. All living things can reproduce. Reproduction does nothing to ensure the survival of the individual, but it is critical to the survival of the species. So reproduction does not ensure survival of the individual, but is critical to survival of the species. More. So to reproduce is to make more. Sometimes we talk about the terminology for like a copier machine used to be a reproduction machine. To make a copy of something can be said to reproduce it. Okay. Reproduction does not ensure the survival of the individual. This mouse, just because she, or rat maybe, just because she has a litter doesn't mean she's going to live longer. These little fish, just because their parents shot a bunch of eggs and sperm into a shallow depression on the side of the lake doesn't mean their parents are going to live any longer. This little tree seedling, just because the maple tree dropped a seed and it sprouted doesn't mean that tree is going to live any longer. But if maple trees or rats or fish don't reproduce, their species dies out. There are no more of them if you don't reproduce yourself, because everything has a lifespan. Everything, even those groves of 1,010, 4,000-year-old trees in California, they're still eventually going to die. Yes, there are 4,000-year-old trees in California. They're really, really old. There are two kinds of reproduction. Do you know what they are? Two ways to reproduce. Two big categories. Give me one, James. There's asexual reproduction. One cell or one parent organism splits, forms two new organisms. Means an identical line of organisms. There is no change from parent to offspring. They are identical. And this is what we see in single-celled organisms. Okay? It's most common in single-celled organisms. The other way to reproduce is sexual reproduction. There you have to have two parents. They contribute a cell each, and they form one new cell, one fertilized cell. Sexual reproduction only happens in multicellular organisms. Now, not all multicellular organisms perform sexual reproduction. Some do perform asexual reproduction. But sexual reproduction is great because it gives you variety in your offspring. So it gives you variation in your offspring. It allows you to have new traits. On Monday, we are going to do some review game stuff over this packet. And then you will have a quiz on Tuesday over the characteristics of life stuff. Similar to the recall quizzes, I may have another full recall quiz for you on Monday online. I'm not sure yet. So that's it.